Hello everyone, and welcome back to my Moxtober recap videos. If you're not aware of what Moxtober is, it's a yearly event where for each day of the month of October, there's a separate one-word prompt based on which people design custom Magic the Gathering cards. And usually, the cool thing is seeing how people interpret the prompt or what directions the prompt takes them that may differ from other people. So in these series of videos, I usually just go through a small selection of cards submitted by the community to talk about the various ways in which people explored and had fun with this day's prompt. Um, if you want your card to have a chance to be featured in one of these videos, um, you'll need to submit it to the collected file with the Moxtober command in one of the primary custom Magic the Gathering servers. I'll be linking the Beacon of Creation server in the description, as well as the list of all prompts for the month, and the Dropbox folder where you can find all of the cards we talk about here and more, because unfortunately, we are bound by time, and so I can't talk about every one of the dozens of cards that are submitted to the file. So we're going to be picking out a selection of just a few of the ones that caught our eye, but there's honestly tons more that are great, so you should go and check them out. Now, you might have noticed that I said we, and that's because I'm joined by special guest MonoWhiteBorder.
Hello.
So why don't you introduce yourself? Because
Oh,
you were on the channel when I was doing these videos back in 2021 for favorite topic bones, but might have been a while. So let's recap the viewers a little bit.
yeah, I am one of the moderators on the Beacon of Creation server. I guest on Beacon of Creation episodes pretty frequently. Used to be a heavy commander player. Now I'm mainly doing custom magic. That's kind of my introduction with magic. I can't even tell you what the last actual magic set was. Doctor Who is relevant right now. That's about all I know. But yeah, I
Sounds
don't know. Is there
good.
anything else people should know about me? Known skeleton fan. That'll
No one's
probably be
yeah
relevant later.
yeah. If it's actually relevant today, I'll be shocked. I did not see any skeletons on a quick run through, but again, I don't have that empty eye socket for skeletons. Um, but yeah, so let's just get into it. What's your first card you got for us?
All right, my first one is from Mark Confidant. It's called Lotus Gardener. One in a black for a 2/1 horror cleric. When it enters the battlefield, compost, exile a card that was playing in your graveyard this turn. And whenever you compost a creature card with mana value 5 or more, create a token copy of Black Lotus. Um, I think Mark has a history of um, doing these like every day he tries to make a new mechanic. And Compost really stuck out to me because it's a fairly new space, but extraordinarily simple, which is just like chef's kiss when you can find that as a custom designer, where it's like, here's a new keyword that is a really simple idea, but has not been explored by canon magic. I'm no expert on custom magic, so maybe other custom magic sets have definitely touched on this idea. But I really like Compost. I think it has actually some good legs to stand on, and would create a pretty interesting format, whether you're trying to do discard, mill, sacrifice, destroy creatures. If you have like a fetch lands in a common format, you're putting your like evolving wilds into the bin and composting that. And then the payoff is that's the real juice. Gain a token copy of Black Lotus. Pretty spicy at 2 mana.
Yeah, I think compost is like again. I have not seen compost again in custom spaces or otherwise. Um, and it's one of those mechanics where like I agree, it's very simple but gets your gears turning, and I think that I like that it encourages an aggressive environment because you're
Mhm.
encouraged to like attack and then you can make trades that end up being favorable because then you immediately get to compost something. Um, and yeah, there's tons of ways you can play with this. I guess my biggest thing is uh, I think that compost has like hidden restrictions in it in the sense of like because of the timing component, for cards like Lotus Gardener, you either already need to have some sort of mill, discard, sack engine online, um, or you need to, or the sequencing becomes awkward because if you just play this on curve, it is, it's just a vanilla.
Yep.
And it loses lots of the flair, which I think some of it can be put down to the specific design, but some of it can also be put down to like designing for this mechanic means that uh, you're gonna have lots of situations where unless you have some sort of engine online or the card itself naturally, like let's say you have like exploit in the environment, for example, allows you to set up your composts. I think it can lead to difficulty sequencing and maybe difficulty in getting the right quote unquote payoff. This one specifically even is
Mm-hmm.
like, I think creature cards are obviously the most ideal to compost because again, you can sack them, you can trade them, you go up the curve with them. They form most of your limited deck. The specific thing of mana value 5 or more though is definitely a hurdle on curve, which I suspect could be like part of the point, right? Like you don't want to give
Mm-hmm.
your players Black Lotus on curve reliably. Um, but it is also one of those things where like sometimes you just play Stitcher Supplier turn one and then you play this turn two and then dumb stuff happens. Um, so yeah, I think this is, I don't know about this card specifically in terms of uh, how much it endears me to compost, but it's like one of those things where like the more I think about compost, I'm a fan, but this card did not endear me to it at first because of the way that it sort of displayed the design space for it, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
This card very much accentuates the difficulty of compost, in which compost is like very high synergy mechanic. It's not a mechanic that you just play and it works and it does the thing. It's like it's a Johnny mechanic. Set up some you have to set up a little mini engine to kind of get this cooking. And
Mm-hmm.
then this card, even adding the restriction of mana value 5 or more to it, adds yet another kind of, okay, I gotta have an engine, I gotta get 5 or more in the graveyard. So if I want to do that early, I'm looking at discard, I'm looking at mill. Sacrificing is a lot harder to do it late. This is 2 mana, but if you play it on curve, then that's a whole other problem of trying to compost something. um, so yeah, I can see how this card um, kind of highlights the wrong part of compost in a way.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think I'm glad that I had you here to talk about the mechanic because I think otherwise, again, I don't know that I would have had as favorable of an impression of it if like you hadn't talked about it a little bit more and made
Mm-hmm.
me start turning those wheels. So yeah,
Yeah, what you got for us?
um, well let's just keep going with your cards for now, and then I'm gonna
Okay.
come in with some
Ooh.
stuff.
Okay. What do I want to do next? Oh, this is a card I really liked from Sage B. It is simple in a different way. It's Glistening Bark Wall. It's 1 green for a creature plant wall with Defender. 1 green, tap, create a food token. A singular fruit from the bark wall is enough to feed an entire village, and it's an O3. Which good to know for future reference that villages have roughly 3 like life points. So if we ever get like village style cards, I think
Or
Treetop Village is a three
or
three.
wait,
So this
is
is
this,
totally on flavor.
yeah, is this is the bark wall, the bark wall's a tree, I thought.
Correct. A single fruit from the bark wall. So the bark wall is giving a fruit of some kind
Mm-hmm.
that feeds the entire village.
Right. So I guess you could say a village's 3 toughnesses worth of food. Okay, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, yeah. Treetop Village is a 3/3.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, 3 life from a food token is enough to feed a village.
And
I get
village is one of the prompts later on. I think
it.
even this week. So you know,
Ooh, so we could get a callback.
you could get a
Sage B
callback.
can reference their own card.
That
The
that is
reason
definitely one of
I
my. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna
oh
say quickly. That is one of my favorite things about Moxtober is when you start to see patterns in people's individual
mm,
designs. Um, like you're saying with Mark, where it's like a mechanic a day, or like there's some lore callback. I love it when there's like an internal narrative of some sort, whether it be a mechanical narrative or literal flavor narrative in people's
mm.
cards.
Sage B is a Beacon of Creation member. They were in the Design League, and to get into the like top 8 of the Design League, they won a challenge that was designing commons. I think yesterday I designed really two really cool commons. They're fairly new to Magic like custom design, I believe. But they've really carved a niche in being like this like common crafter where they can just like pump out commons like crazy, which is a really useful skill to have
Mm-hmm.
because I just got done designing the commons for the custom set I'm working on. And done is a very loose terminology. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more changes, but I am moving on to looking at trying to get some uncommons in the set. And it's really hard to design commons. Mark Rosewater talks about how hard it is to design commons. Like, commons are a tricky thing to design. And I don't know, Sage B always is able to get commons that are really interesting to me. They usually have really strong flavor. And I think this one does all of that. Like, this is a neat common. It feels like it would be like it's something I could see in a set as like, hey, maybe there's some sort of green X food deck. Here's a nice little card that can pump out some food. The downside of this card is that like if you're worried about games grinding to a halt in limited, like this card can definitely slow down some games. An 0-3 blocker for 1 mana is really strong, and then if you're pumping out food tokens late game to gain 3 life, like you can really undo some aggro strategies. But I really like the flavor. I think it's a fun design. I think it's a very like common feeling realistic. It's a commony common is the way I thought about it.
For me, the repeated food creation is like definitely an alarm bell in terms of it being a
Mm-hmm.
common for me, just because like I and like I wanted to like touch base on this because sometimes I think that uh, I am like I may be a little biased against food just because of the impact that they have on a limited format, like slowing it down. This is already defender so and so, but like looking at it at common, basically the only repeated food producer is like giant skewer, and that requires your opponent to like throw blockers into it to do the repeated producing. I think
Mm-hmm.
that like I think this at common could I think that there's a big risk of this like
Yep.
grinding games to a halt, and I think I wish there was like more of a cost than just like mana slash tempo to create a food, especially because again the initial cost is pretty low, and if you're in a deck that
Yeah.
wants to be going slow already, yeah, like I don't disagree. I think it's one of those things where it's like I think this captures what a common wants in terms of like simplicity but like pointed, if that makes sense. Like I think lots of times people like either make commons too complicated to get to point to a certain strategy, or they make them too simple and they're just sort of aimless. Well, I think that this is simple but in a way that like okay, I'm playing a slower game. I want like food synergies, artifact synergies, life gain synergies. Um, I have a direction if I am picking this card. Um, so I do like that. But yeah, I'm not as sold on the commonness of it just because of the play pattern of the repeated food.
Yeah, and that's a. I don't know how well it worked. Lord of the Rings set really put an emphasis on trying to make sure there were a bunch of different things to do with food other than gain life. And I played like exactly one pre-release of the Lord of the Rings set, and I didn't feel like that format I was getting bogged down in the food creation. Granted, like you said, that format also didn't have quite the efficiency of a food producer as this glistening bark wall.
Mm.
But if you have enough other payoffs for doing food things, you're still it's going to encourage players to use that food production for something else. So maybe there's hope for this card in a format that's just like use food for anything but gaining life.
Yeah, I mean, I think
But I
even then
think
it's
you're
like an
right.
incredibly strong engine still, right? Because you're getting
Yep.
the like again for like a one drop common. I mean, obviously one drops in limited are usually one drops in limited are usually aren't that great. But like let's just say
Mm-hmm.
a cheap common, um, its engine potential definitely feels like a little higher than what I would want for common. I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, hit us with that next card.
Okay, so we've done a rare and we've done a common. How about an uncommon? And this one's kind of a I don't know. This could have been anecdotal. I don't have any evidence of this, but I noticed a lot of signposty feeling uncommons. that people were designing. So let's go with this one, Vineyard Vandal, one green blue, flying ward 1. Whenever a player creates a food token, you may pay green white. If you do, you gain 1 life and put a +1/+1 counter on Vineyard Vandal. It's a 1/2 creature drake. It's kind of got this cool art. I think the art's really what caught my attention at first.
Yeah, this is
Um,
actually I use this art as sort of the centerfold art for the thumbnail for this video.
oh, delightful,
It is
delightful.
a great art. Design wise, I think my only gripe is the fact that it says a player rather than whenever you, because I think that it makes the mirror a little bit more fraught with having to track
Hmm.
your opponent's vandals. Um, I also
I
don't know
I
about. I'm
I
sorry.
imagine that was a flavor choice to really get the Vandal sense to it of like, oh, I'm stealing food from my opponent, kind of.
Fair, fair. But yeah, mechanically, the specific thing that catches my eye, right, is that you have like a center color of green, and
Yep.
then sort of offset payoffs. And I like this as an idea for like a tricolor faction set where you have like overlapping factions, and then if you just want like maybe this could be buffed a little bit as like as an uncommon 2 color card, but if you just want like let's say a slightly better Windrake in your in either faction, you can pick it up, but it has like a boost if you're in a specific faction.
Right. Yeah, I really, really, the thing that caught my eye was the technology for 3-ish color sets. Um, and I thought it was really cool. I also um, enjoyed that it is a food. It's a green white card, or sorry, excuse me. It's a green blue card that cares about food, but you have to have white to care about the food, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a good, like, maybe it was instincts, maybe it was really thought out by this person, but to keep it from being um, like too much of a bend where there's a green blue card that cares about gaining life, to make that green white cost to
Mm-hmm.
do it, I think was really smart as just a flavor pie acknowledgement. Whether whether you're flavor pie agnostic or not,
To be
I
fair,
liked
we
that.
didn't we just get like that goose hydra that makes a bunch of food?
Oh yeah, we did.
Yeah, the
Is that
goose
a
mother.
Eldraine? Yeah.
Yeah. I think that it's one of those things where like I agree because I think that there was turn into a pumpkin from the first Eldraine, which is just sort
Yeah.
of like, huh? Uh, but I think that while green blue can get food production and caring about food because of the green part of it, when you make the part of the food or part of the card that cares about food both of the life gain colors, I agree it feels like a lot more I don't know how to put it. What you said about the flavor pie is right. It just it makes it feel more right.
Hmm. I also want to shout out the Ward 1 here. I don't love Ward, especially when it's just like thrown around on these powerful cards. But like Ward 1, it feels so perfect on this card to me because this is like a pretty low floor card where it's just a 3 mana 1/2 with flying, not that great, but it has this engine, and the Ward 1 is just that little bit of extra so that like there's a better chance that you get that engine going. That's where I like my wards at. Is like, here's this card, it's just a little underpowered if you can't get the engine going, and that's a feels bad. So here we're going to help you just a little bit to make sure that you have a chance to kind of put together your engine and start getting counters on this thing so it's a little scary, rather than like, oh, this card is good, and if you get the engine going it's really scary, and also we're going to throw ward on there to make sure that it really has a good chance of getting the engine going.
Mm.
I like when ward is bumping up a card rather than it feels like just an extra feels bad on top of an already strong card.
Yeah, and specifically because of the engine requiring mana payment into it, it feels like it's evening the playing field where it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I invested stuff into this. You're also going to have to invest something if you want to kill it, buddy. So, that sort of not duality, but like the fair, like it's very much like a fair's fair type of deal.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I don't know if we mentioned the designer. This was designed by Braxonian, so shout out them. Or if you did mention it, my bad, I just forgot. So I
No,
had to
I
go check.
totally spaced it.
Okay, so
Good catch. Um, Here's my next one, and this is a callback to the beginning of the episode. This one's Bone Orchard, 2 black green for an enchantment. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, create a 1/1 black and green skeleton plant creature token with Decayed and tap add a colorless. It can't block when it attacks. Sacrifice the end of the combat. That's the Decayed text. And then sacrifice 4 creature tokens. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Designed by Dude 1818. And
interesting.
yeah, this is just totally me being self-righteous and wanting to take a look at the one skeleton card I was able to pull out of the file.
Yeah, and it does a bunch of interesting things, right? Because like
Mm-hmm.
you, because it has decayed, they're sort of like at first I was like, I don't like that they're essentially just creatures in name only because
Mm-hmm.
you're 100% encouraged to use them as just like mana rocks. But then you get to the second part. I kind of wish it didn't say 4 creature tokens. I wish it just said 4 creatures, and
Mm-hmm.
you could incidentally like use your like. I wish you weren't shoehorned into using just these tokens, and that it was sort of just like these are creatures these are creatures because they can help contribute to this ability, but they don't have to. If that makes sense. Like I like a like
Mm-hmm.
because it's sort of a very one-to-one thing. I don't know how much I like that, but I like that like it overall. I like this card because again, it I think the skeleton plant is incredibly flavorful, and I like that it's this sort of choice where it's like, okay, do I want to keep like ramping, or is there a point where I'm out of gas and I need to convert some of my seeds into like mulching and refertilizing one
Mm-hmm.
of my old dead creatures?
Yeah. I think the creature tokens was kind of just like a safety net so that you're not because this card is like a solid amount of advantage. It can be a little repetitive. Like I guess if it's sacrifice 4 creatures, that ends up creating more skeleton. Like it can create skeletons, so it replenishes itself. So
And
I
there's a chance of
understand why they.
like enabling loops a little easier. Like right now, because right now it
Mhm.
does loop if you have a creature that creates 4 more creature tokens on ETB. But that's like that's a little less likely than like let's say karmic guide loops or something that's maybe a
Yeah.
little bit easier to enable. Yeah.
Hmm. It right now the rarity is at common. I'm sure that was kind of just like a an afterthought,
Yeah, I think it's
and
probably just like a no rarity, I assume.
yeah, and then yeah, depending on what rarity you want this at, you can decide how loopy you want this to get. With maybe you're adding creature tokens, maybe you're saying no, actually you can sacrifice any creatures, and we'll let you make some more tokens. Um, but yeah, I just I love any card that gives me a skeleton token.
And this is a really
And
unique one.
yeah, it is. It misses out on the skeleton flavor of like regeneration or the skeletons come back in some way. But I don't really have a problem with that on a token because it's just already like regeneration is knocked out and it's already annoying enough to like try and keep track of tokens and bring them back, especially when tokens have like a lot of abilities.
Mm.
So I'll let it slide there. It is like another thing of so right now I have a skeleton commander deck and it's still skeleton ship, which is black blue. So the there's like a lot of green skeletons out there, so I still got to figure out a way to incorporate green somehow, so I can get some of the sweet black green stuff. And this card leaning into the black green flavor of skeletons, which is definitely out there. There's been plant skeletons before as well, with the Golgari, so
Yeah.
definitely in the flavor wheelhouse for me. Definitely thumbs up there as well.
I know we mentioned that this is not actually a common, but I think it would be interesting to see a set built around these skeleton tokens in the sense of like have like doing the stuff that Innistrad did with encouraging you to swing out with your decayed tokens and getting value there, but also just also having like big mana game plans where you just create a bunch of these and then go to town.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be a really interesting dynamic for a set, right? Where you have this token is spammable for like cheap go wide strategies and top end decks. So like every deck wants a piece of this Johnny Appleseed skeleton.
I am really big fan of Decayed, and more so on Decayed specifically the tokens that can't block and or have a lot of trouble blocking. I'm really big on that. I think it's people like tokens and it's fun to have them at common, but tokens can just like create these miserable board states where no one can do anything or somebody's infinitely far ahead but they can't swing out because they'll get their board wiped by a bunch of random tokens.
Mm-hmm.
So decayed being a word that you put on your tokens at common, big thumbs up from me.
Yeah, and it allows you to like just put them at so much more aggressive of a rate. It allows you to like
Mm-hmm.
it's just neat tech. It's a really neat tech. Yeah. Okay, what do you have for us next?
All right, I think I'm gonna go with this card from Moon Muse Brandon. Moon Muse Brandon? I think that's right. Moon Muse Brandon. Orchard Torture. 1 red for a 1/1 artifact creature scarecrow. It's a rare and it has haste. When Orchard Torture enters the battlefield, put 2+1/+1 counters on it for each land put into your graveyard from the battlefield this turn. And then it has the activate ability sacrifice a forest, return Orchard Torture from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. I think this card stuck out to me specifically because I love a card where you're reading the text box and you're just like, what? what the? This doesn't make any sense. And then you get to the end of the text box and it kind of lays it out for you. Like, here's how the card works. So with this one, for example, you're looking at and for each land put in the graveyard from the battlefield this turn. Well, that's weird, especially for my 1-drop. But you can return it from the battlefield for sacrificing a forest, and then you get this 2/2 at the cost of a land. So definitely like kind of cool in your red deck wins strategy, and then a natural like, hey, red deck wins, puts some stomping grounds or other forests in your deck to get this back, and now you have a 2/2 to give you that little extra resiliency to fight through the control deck.
Or well, 3/3.
3/3. Yes, math is a really useful skill with Magic cards, and that
So
is what this would be, is a 3/3.
so I think that this is a super cool card in a format without fetch lands. Just
Mm-hmm.
don't put this anywhere near a fetch format, and then we're good friends. Um, there is also the
Design your.
thing of like, can you? I almost want the sack of forest ability to be sorcery speed so that you can't,
Mm-hmm.
in response to itself, like it's like a minor thing, but I kind of don't want this to be able to do the thing where it's like I sack like 3 forests and it comes back as a 7/7, and it's like, oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that's a good catch. That is a really good catch. It would feel extraordinarily weird. It feels like one of those like design a card with like a bug feature, like the Oblivion Ring having it separated as two paragraphs, where it's like that is not what was intended. But kudos on you for finding the workaround. But we're gonna fix that in post,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Um, yeah, I think I do have a appreciation and respect for these like 1-drop rare red aggro cards, like red deck win cards, and this like kind of fits perfectly into that
Yeah, and this
that
and this
concept for
and this
me.
does feel interesting in the sense of like I think that I like those when they, what is that one? It's that new Falconroth card, Falconroth Gorger, I think, where it's like it's a 2/1 for 1 for red, and you can pay 2, sacrifice it, discard a card to draw 2 cards if an opponent was dealt damage this turn, and it's
Yep.
like I like phoenixes, I like this, I like stuff like that where it's or it's no, it's not Falconroth Gorger, it's Falconroth Pitfighter, I think,
Yep.
but I like when there are cards like that where they're not like giving you the insane recursive value that you need to dip into other colors for, but they're just sticky enough that like control or what or like mid-range opponents can't just like 1 for 1 you into 2 for 1ing you and then just sort of sit back and never stabilize. Uh, these sort of cards force them to like have a way to stabilize quickly, or you can just put your pressure back on again.
Mm-hmm.
And again, yeah, it's using resources. It's a responsible way of doing that sort of additional
Yeah.
pressure. But yeah,
And you're like it's a non-trivial resource in the specific matchup. It's both a trivial and a non-trivial resource in the specific matchup you're talking about, because like in these control matchups, a lot of times what's going to swing the game is landing your like big powerful 4-drop at the right time. So you can't do this early, but then like once you get late game, you're gonna just be flooded, and like bringing this back is at least something to do, so you're not just like bored out of your mind as you play another forest and pass the turn.
mm-hmm.
At least you get to do something. I it's the little victories. You may have completely locked me out of this game, but I'm bringing back a 3/3, and you got to think about it now.
Yeah, I think that is one of the like you do say that, but I think there's lots of times where like there's a control player who's like I've got this in the bag, and then again, assuming that we're shipping this in its current state and not with the activate only as a sorcery clause, it's just like end of turn, sack 3 forests, bring back my 7/7, shake my hand, and it's like,
Well,
damn it.
even even if you did, this is the actual. I think this would be very interesting to see in a format of like, even if you put the sorcery on this, but you have like you've played 3 of these during the game. The first one comes back as a 3/3, the next one comes back as a 5/5, and then the last one comes back as a 7/7. And like, sure, you just sacrificed a bunch of your lands, but
Ugh, yeah,
like that's a scary board.
yeah, that's a pretty disgusting board.
Flavor is also really good, by the way. Obviously, it's like you're burning your forest,
And the name just feels delightful to say. Orchard.
Yes. Yep. So, all right, good card, fun card. Maybe make it a sorcery. Something to think about. Okay.
Do you have any other cards, or is it my turn to start poking?
You want to take your turn? I can leave some cards for you. I got more cards if you want me to go through more cards, but you can certainly take your turn.
Sure. I was more just like I've been looking over the file as we were talking, and I'm like, these are some cool ones.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go to Orchard Overseer.
Oh my god, that's the exact card I was on as my next card. That is so fun.
Well, okay, perfect. So this is Orchard Overseer by friend of the show, Brotein Manganiello, otherwise known as Mako. Known in the custom community for being the return set person, designed Taros Triumphant recently, and before that the Return to Alara set just named Alara. And this one seems to be sort of, judging by the giant watermark, from a hypothetical future project, Innistrad in Memoriam. As far as like the actual design goes, it's pretty simple, showcasing the foreshadow mechanic. So it's 3 and a green for a creature tree folk, 3/3 reach. When it dies, put 2+1/+1 counters on target creature you control. But if you cast it for 5 and a green, it has this alt cost of foreshadow, and when you cast it for its foreshadow cost, it triggers its die's abilities when it enters the battlefield, which feels perfect for an Innistrad set. That's just caring about death in that way is perfect. And I think that Mako, if you look at their previous sets, this is a thing that they love doing, which is baking value into a card inherently, but then allowing you to pay more as a cast trigger to really go ham. They had a mechanic called Colossal, which was basically Monstrosity, but you could also cast it for the Monstrosity cost, and just get your value straight up. So this very much feels like that, where it leads to interesting decisions in limited and gives you things to do at the top of at various points in the curve with a single card.
Yeah. So foreshadow was the reason I had this card highlighted, as like that mechanic feels so finished and so polished and so delightful that I legitimately wanted to ask, and like this is just a huge compliment if I'm wrong. Is this an already existing custom mechanic, or is this a custom mechanic that was designed for this set by Brotein?
I'm pretty sure that this is a Brotein original. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an amazing mechanic. Like it looks like it's it was workshopped by a different set, and so then it fits perfectly in Innistrad. Like that's how it looks so good. It looks like it's from a finished set already.
Yeah, I think Mako. I think there are a lot of like proficient designers in the custom community, each with their own strengths, and I think Mako's biggest strength comes from two things, which is they have an incredibly mechanics focused approach where
Mhm.
they'll open up a file, grind through like a bunch of different suites of mechanics, and then once they have a suite of mechanics, they design like the rest of the set. Um,
Mhm.
and obviously they're like very good at like touching on what makes a return set important in terms of like flavor. But I think that like again that mechanic focused approach makes the sets fun to draft and play in a way like maybe not just fun because there's lots of other fun custom sets, but I think it's very clean is the way I would put it, and I think that's a I think that does that sum up the sentiment you had as well.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. It's just like it's yeah. This mechanic just feels fully formed. It is so it's another one of those examples of mechanic that is so easy to understand. It feels so simple, yet it hasn't really been explored yet. And I think that is like the exact space you want to be in of just like you pick this up and people are like, how why didn't I think of this? This is so good. This is so good and so simple. Like, man, I wish I had been the person to come up with this.
Yeah, I
And
feel like lots of the
like you
best
said, it's
mechanics come from like taking an existing mechanic and then stepping one step to the left.
yeah.
It's just like figuring out what direction is left is the hardest part sometimes.
hmm Yeah, but yeah, this is awesome. So I have nothing else to say about it.
Word.
10 out of 10.
Okay, I'm gonna throw it back to you if you have any other cards,
Ooh, do I have another one?
and if not, worry not. I do have one or two other cards I'd like to talk
Well,
about.
yeah. Why don't you go for another one, and
For
I
sure.
got some more I can pull.
Okay. Next up, we've got Orange Orchard's Blessing, designed by Gateways. Um, So this is red and a white for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, create a 2/1 red and white fox creature token. Whenever you attack, if you attacked with foxes with total power 5 or greater this combat, exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. Now, I have to come clean. I may have started talking about this card as a Trojan horse to talk about some custom magic history. I know. I'm sorry. Um, but this card and the card I designed for today, which is Huli of the Warden of the Orange Orchard, uh, both of those are reference to an unlikely card that became, I think, one of the foremost custom magic memes, and that is Fox of the Orange Orchard. So Fox of the Orange Orchard is a pretty unassuming card. It's uh, one and a white for a creature fox spirit. It's a vanilla 3/1 at common. It's a classic Oreskos. Is it Swiftclaw? I think it's Oreskos Swiftclaw. You know, your 2 mana aggressive attacker. Um, it is one of many, many, many like draft chaff commons that no one ever has a reason to think of once the set's limited heyday has passed. Um, but Fox of the Orange Orchard specifically uh, got picked up again and became a legend because back in the day, LackeyBot, which is the bot that people use to collect the cards for Moxtober and put them in these nice files, thanks to Cajun for creating LackeyBot, um, is also used to search custom cards. It has a custom card database, uh, both like a general database and then databases for specific formats. So Fox of the Orange Orchard, the set it's from, is in MSCM, and LackeyBot has fuzzy search. So one day people were messing around with fuzzy search and someone tried to fuzzy search the next card to be banned in MSCM. The result? Fox of the Orange Orchard. So all of a sudden, uh, this vanilla 3-1 became the subject of much memeing, with people making honest to God Fox tribal decks to fit it in there. Um, and eventually, 2 years ago, in this month exactly, uh, a group of players decided to come together and start Foxtober, with the idea being we're going to put a copy of Fox of the Orange Orchard in our deck somewhere, in the sideboard, in the main board, whatever. And MSEM has it obviously cannot offer cash or physical prizes for like winning tournaments. But what it does do is you get a special alt art of a card in your deck as like a champion promo that is then in the immortalized in format history. So people came together and were like, "We are going to get Fox of the Orange Orchard a champion promo," and it eventually did. It got a champion promo, um, and it became uh, the subject of many questions by new players to the format who are looking through the trophy case of previous decks and end up going, "Guys, why is there a vanilla 3-1 there? Someone please explain." Um, Now these days, Fox of the Orange Orchard is sort of, uh, its time has passed as a meme. It reached the peak, and obviously once you get there, there's not much more you can do. The fuzzy search now, if you search the next card to be banned in MSCM, thanks to new sets added, it no longer shows Fox of the Orange Orchard, but its legacy is enduring. So people still love to make Orange Orchard cards, and I'm people, which is also why I made Huli Warden of the Orange Orchard, which is just um, a Fox of the Orange Orchard, but what if it was 1 mana instead of 2 mana? Which makes it, as it turns out, a lot more broken. But this was designed for a cube-esque environment, so that makes it okay. Um, but yeah, going back to Orange Orchard Blessing, that is why it's got this like Fox tribal element, and the total power 5 or greater means that you're encouraged to use it with this 3-1 in Fox of the Orange Orchard, because it creates a 2-1 token. You play your 3-1, bam, you're in business.
I One of the few custom Magic stories that I know is that Orange Orchard Fox one, because I think I've heard it from you once or twice now. I always love hearing it, and
Oh wait,
yeah,
did it
it's
already
great.
come up in the? Uh, it was the playable. Is this MSCM playable podcast that we had one time?
No, it was. Ooh, I don't know what podcast it was in. But yeah, it appeared on a Beacon of Creation podcast. It's probably one of my. It's definitely the story, the MSE story I remember most. The MSEM story I remember most from that podcast. I think it wasn't because you put that card. Oh, maybe you did put that card on there. I believe it was because you put another card that got like the promo, the champion promo on there, and
Ah,
so you
gotcha.
told a separate story about the Orange Orchard. But I like the enchantment for sure. Two mana enchantment kind of signposty. Is that a uncommon set symbol or mythic set symbol? I
It's
could see
a
this.
The purple one is just special rarity, which is usually
Okay.
used as sort of like, again, like a no rarity, opt out of
Hmm.
rarity. Um,
I could. I like this though as like an actual card too, because it's just a 2 mana enchantment that gives you a 2/1, so it does something, and then it has this like additional tricky upside that you can try and pull off, and you get a card draw. Nothing too crazy.
I almost want it to just be total power 5 or greater rather than foxes with total power 5 or greater,
Hmm.
but I think I it commits to the bit in
Yeah,
focusing on foxes.
yeah, and you get like a fox tribal sub theme in your cube maybe or something, and this feels right at home.
Yeah. Okay, I got to do my rant. Your turn, popcorn. Hit me with a
All
card.
right. We haven't talked about any lands yet, and orchards certainly lend themselves to designing some land cards. So this one is from Larson called Spectral Orchard. It is a land. It enters the battlefield tapped, and then you can tap it to add blue or black. Whenever this mana is used to cast a spell from your graveyard or activate an ability from your graveyard, each opponent loses 1 life. and it's an uncommon. I just kind of like this card as a it is an interesting mana fixer for that, like ETB enters tapped, make a mana of either one of these colors, and then here's the theme of the color pair is you want to cast and activate things from your graveyard. And the one life is something that feels a little incidental, but will definitely add up in the long run.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and I
but
think
yeah,
that one thing that kind of, I guess, gets my goat a little bit about this is I I think that enters tapped and loses life are not completely incompatible, right? But I do wish there was
mm-hmm.
sort of what do you call it? Like I do wish there was a payoff that was maybe a little bit more suited to a slower deck than like a fast deck. Like like maybe this is broken, but I my first thought is what if it's surveilled one? Um, and if it's surveilled one, you would get to then what do you call it? It would like self enable in a sense, and it would help slower decks as it would dig deeper and find you the cards you need. But yeah, but I
Maybe
like
this
the. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
maybe this is my endearment to Larson as a designer. Larson's a like Demir mage through and through, and their favorite archetype is like Demir drain my opponent one life at a time very slowly. So like in the original Innistrad zombies, I think one of their favorite cards is the Ikoria card that like whenever you cast a spell on an opponent's turn, it drains them for one life. So that might have been a brand choice of just like what I want to do is I want to drain people for one life when I do a niche thing in Demir colors.
I
But
respect
I
it. I
do like
respect
the
it.
surveil touch of hey, this keeps enabling you to do this over and over again.
Yeah. Um, do you have any other cards for us? If not, I have one more serious card and then one, or sorry, one to two more serious cards, one more joke card, and I think that's the road for me. So,
Yeah, I can throw out one more card as well.
okay, throw out that one more
You
card,
want all right.
and then I'll head into all me.
This one comes from Red Bay over in Beacon of Creation. It's Berry Orchard Tender, 3 green for a 2/3 legendary creature human. Tap, create a food token. If one or more cards left your graveyard this turn, create 2 food tokens instead. 3 green, sacrifice a food, return target land card from your graveyard to your hand. Just a this is a very classic dirtily build around commander that gets my attention every time. I'm sorry, I can't help it. Definitely feels like a card where it's like I'm just gonna show up at the commander table and I'm gonna spin my wheels for a couple turns while somebody else's wins, and that's what I'm here for. I'm here for a good time.
Yeah, I almost wonder. I kind of wish the second ability was a little bit more aggressively costed, so you could.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that is the part which definitely feels like there could be some fun, silly stuff going on, where, um, like obviously both abilities synergize with each other, but then you could do some like land looping shenanigans or like, yeah, it feels like there could be some. I get and like obviously Gitrog Monster is like the land looper, but like this feels like it could be like you mentioned, like a little bit more like I'm not here to do some crazy glacial pass loops. I'm just here to have a good time and get some value off of some fun cards.
Yeah. Hmm. I'm like, okay, so if I have Minimo, School at Water's Edge, I can create a, I can sacrifice a food and return this, and play my Minimo, and then tap this and make a food, and then untap it with my Minimo, and that's where I'm at. I mean, yeah, I feel like even if you have like some crazy untapping shenanigans, it's this card's pretty safe. Overall, there's nothing. You're not gonna do anything too crazy or get too out of hand. You're just gonna make a lot of food.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess Retreat to Coral Helm. That's the other card. That's the enchantment that landfall untap.
Hmm.
That's where you can. That's where
That's
you
when you
can
really
really
start
crank
cooking.
out
Of
your.
course, can't do
Yeah,
that.
you
Can't
can
do that in
crank out your.
Commander,
Yeah.
but
No, no, no. But if you're in like standard, you can crank out 4 food instead of 2 food.
mhm. And I mean, honestly, that's pretty decent affinity. You get your Imperize
Yeah.
cards in there. Some artifact synergy. We're cooking.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's just a fun dirtly card, and I love fun dirtly cards.
Respect.
All right, what you got?
Next up, I've got Harvest Tide Ritual, which is just 1 green for an enchantment, and when it enters the battlefield, you make a 1/1 white human creature token, and it has Coven. As long as you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, creatures you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color. Um, and I like this is just like feels like a again, it feels like one of those I need like a little note card so that I could have my definition of clean on hand all the time. But this really is just clean. You a very simple ETB effect that helps you curve out, and then uh, the Coven effect is both flavorfully given cryptolith like this is it gives you a cryptolith right, but it makes sense both flavorfully and mechanically as a payoff for that. Um, and because of how cheap this is, depending on what the other stuff you're using to activate Coven is, I could see this being a really competitive ramp engine. Uh, like you could do like Elf Ball style stuff with it, but obviously with a little bit more of a hoop.
The strongest compliment I can pay this card is that it was on my list, and I was trying to trim my list down a little bit so it was easier to go through. And I trimmed this card because I figured Caillou would bring it up.
Hey,
And I was totally right. Yeah, this is.
vindicated.
I think I'm partial to any enchantment that gives me a creature. Like, here, have fun, play your cool build around enchantment, but don't lose out on board state. That's a win for me. And then you're absolutely right. Getting the cool ability at the top end once you reach Coven, and this enabling Coven as well. It's a delightful card. Really really nice rare.
Okay, and that's my last serious card for the day. I do want to look at one more card, and that's Crab Apple Crawley,
Oh,
which
nice.
it's by Raidzel. Uh, Welcome back, Raidzel. It's 4 green green for a 7/6 trample with food emerge 2 green green. You may cast the spell by sacrificing a food and paying the emerge cost reduced by that food's mana value. And I mean, come on, that's just great. I really do just love like
Don't
yeah.
forget the creature type either. The
Oh
creature
my
type
god,
worm.
worm. Oh, that's so dumb and so delightful. I love it. Like I love how this is a card which is like totally kosher black border mechanically, but it's dripping with silver border flavor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just it makes you smile. Like what more can you
Yeah.
want from Magic?
Does it spark joy? Absolutely, it sparks joy.
It
100%.
oh yeah, hell yeah.
I love the nicheness of food emerge too, because most of the time the reduced by the food's mana cost is not going to be relevant. But
Hmm.
you got your ginger brute. Now you got a 3 mana 7/6. Now you're really cooking. Like, let's go.
Yeah, can't wait for my competitive worm standard deck. But yeah, that's all the time we've got. So as always, remember to check the description for 3 things: links to the Beacon of Creation and Custom Magic Discord servers, where you can submit cards to the shared file by using the $Moxtober command and linking your card image. Um, there's also a link to an image which has all of the 31 prompts for the 31 days of October. And finally, there's a link to the Dropbox, which has the MSC files for each day of the month, which will be constantly updated as people submit new cards to the file. So, if you want your cards to be featured potentially on future videos, make sure to submit your designs to that shared file. If you want to hop on as a host, or co-host for one of the future episodes, DM me on Discord. I'm KAYIU102. And thanks to MonoWhiteBorder for joining me. This was great. Had a fun time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I was really excited to see these were making a comeback, and definitely more people jump on. Let's try and make this as easy for Caillou to do as possible because these are not freebies to do these every day. A lot of work goes in.
Yeah, and again, this it's possible because of people like MonoWhiteBorder who are willing to co-host, people like Cajun who
Cajun.
put together the collection here, people like Ancestral and Bradley who do more outreach for this event than I could ever imagine, and people like you who, not to get like too PBS on y'all, who make the cards, uh, and give me the material with which to talk about. But yeah, um, until next time, this is Caillou signing off.